Welcome and thanks for joining us on episode number 274 of the Financially Independent Teachers Podcast. If you think your story could help other educators and you'd be willing to come on the show, please check out our webpage at financiallyindependentteachers.com and fill out that form to come on the show. That's what we've got today. We've got one of our Facebook community members. I see Noah every now and again comment on stuff and maybe like some stuff. And he's all into the personal finance and he's a math guy. I feel like doing the whole thing from Wayne's World. We're not worthy. We're not worthy. I'm a failed high school and college math student that somehow gets to teach personal finance, but I know how to use a compound interest calculator. I can do the rule of 72, and I can figure out that if I make $8,000 a year as a family and my bills are 6,000, I have a $2,000 gap number. That's about as far as my math goes. But Noah, thank you for being willing to fill out that form and come on the show. I think today is going to be a really fun episode as we're kind of kicking off the summer here.
Absolutely, man. I think you hit all the important things about math. I tell my students, like, when they ask, when am I going to use this? And we're learning something like calculus. And I say, in your everyday life, you're probably not going to use calculus. The math that's really important is the simple stuff. It's, the rule of 72 and doubling your money every 7 years and whatever it might be. I always tell students that math is a way of thinking, right? Like it trains your brain for how to be logical. And if they forget the calculus after 10 years, but they're still a logical, efficient person, I feel like that's a big win. Yeah.
Yeah, I was that kid in high school where I'd say, when am I ever going to use this? This is
Mm.
stupid. Like, when am I ever, I'm not going to be an engineer. I'm not going to go into this. I'm not going to go into that. When am I going to use it? But it's really all about problem solving, right? And like you said, it's working your brain, it's working a muscle. And, I feel like there are major problems that we're all having to try to solve, with the economy and gas prices and wars and rumors of wars and all the different things, elections, and it goes for both parties. We don't get into politics on the show, but there's
Yeah.
always somebody who's saying, oh my God, Biden's going to get elected, the economy is going to get ruined, and the stock market's going to be terrible. And same thing with Trump, whatever. But there are real issues out there for families and especially teachers where we don't generally have the largest incomes compared to our college roommates maybe that went on to be an accountant or they're a doctor or a pharmacist or something like that, and there are so many in the world of education that kind of take that vow of poverty. So I can't
Mm.
wait to share your story. And I want you guys to stick around here because here's a teacher that started out making under $30,000 a year and
Yeah.
before the age of 40 became a net worth millionaire. But there's so much to get to. Can you give us like a little bit of a brief background of, your role in education, how long you've been in, and then I want to individually kind of touch on some of your experiences in the different countries you've been in later on.
Absolutely. So I graduated from Notre Dame with a degree in mathematics. I was not planning on being a teacher, but all my friends said, you got to try it. They said, you would be so good because what really gets me going is finding different ways to make math make sense to people. And they all said, oh, you're so good at this, you got to try. And Notre Dame had a program called the Alliance for Catholic Education. And they pick a school for you to go to, an under-resourced Catholic school somewhere in the South. And they sent me to St. Petersburg Catholic in St. Petersburg, Florida, where I was making about $400 a month. I mean, it was peanuts. And
And was this
they
an
they gave us,
internship or is this actually postgraduate work here?
yep, postgraduate work. So it's part of a master's program, and this still exists. I was in the 17th class of ACE, and it's now, I think, the 33rd they're on. Yeah, that makes sense because I've been teaching 16 years. And you get a master's degree in the process. So you get a master's degree, you get a license to teach in the state of Indiana, which is reciprocal across 35 states. Anyone wants to check it out, just Google the ACE program, Alliance for Catholic Education. And so you do 2 years of teaching, you do 2 summers at Notre Dame doing coursework, and then you do some online courses in the process as well. They give you a place to stay, you live in community. And so the money you make is, very minimal, just enough to live, basically. And so I really credit that for giving me the skills to figure out how to live in a really thrifty manner. And kind of when I started making more money, I just didn't let the lifestyle creep in. And so 2 years in Florida, and then they had this option where you could go teach in Santiago, Chile, at a Catholic school in Santiago. So I taught English to preschoolers for 2 years, which is hilarious coming off of a high school calculus background. And then I went back home to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm from a suburb called Edina. I taught at my alma mater, Edina High School, for 5 years. But the whole time I was kind of itching to get away. And I started searching around, just kind of, how can you teach abroad? Got hooked up with an international school in Vietnam. I was there for 4 years. That's where I met my wife, who ironically is from Michigan. So we're both in Vietnam on day one of work. I met her. And we were there 4 years. That was where we weathered COVID, did online teaching there. It was wild. There was razor wire keeping people in their own districts. And we weren't allowed to leave our apartment for about 6 months. And then it's always been my wife's dream to live in Europe. And so we started hunting around. I went to a website called Search Associates, which is a really popular website for people that want to teach in an international school. And they have a filter option where you can say, like, how much could I save depending on which location I'm in? And Prague popped up as like a huge savings opportunity because the packages here are really good. That's a little bit of international teacher speak. You talk about the package, which is housing allowance, flights home, payment, retirement, and everywhere does it differently. But the package in Prague is really good because the cost of living is still pretty low here. It's creeping up like it is everywhere. But I realized that that gap that I was going to have was going to allow me to keep investing aggressively. And so we've been here 3 years now. We're expecting our first kid in about a week and a half. Well, it's the due date. The kid's going to come when the kid's going to come. But we're stoked to be here. We're sticking around for a fourth year and perhaps beyond because we really love it here. It's a great city. So that's me.
Well, prayers for mom and for the baby and for the whole family that that everything goes well and that you get rest and that you can start that 529 account or whatever it is that you
Yeah,
want to do
dude,
for the
I'm
college
ready.
savings. But so let me kind of hit on one point there. You talked about, your wife is also a teacher and you
Yeah.
met her the first day in Vietnam. So funny that, two kids from the Midwest meet all the way around the world in Asia and Vietnam.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to turn this into like a Netflix special on like Love is Blind or anything like that. But was it like, hey, I met this gal the first day and I kind of knew, hey, I really want to get to know this girl, or did it was it like that? Like, hey, I'm a teacher, she's a teacher, like I need to get her number. How did that go down?
Yeah, I mean it was a lot of things all at once. So the way I always tell the story, they picked us all up on the first day of work in this van, and the door opened up, and they had told us that we could wear whatever we wanted on this first day because we were doing like a tour of the city. It was hotter than heck out there, and so I had like gym shorts and like a workout shirt on. And the door opened, and I see this goddess like wearing a dress and in full makeup, right? And I'm like, oh Jesus, I'm in the wrong van. And yeah, I knew right away. I was like, I need to to know this person better. Took her a little longer. I had to put in some work, but like one of the things that was interesting to me was we shared so many values because our upbringing in the Midwest was similar. We had similar family types, and but finding someone that wanted to travel and was into that like teaching abroad mentality, that was really important to me. And I didn't realize that until I arrived somewhere that was full of people that were thinking like me. And also, I realized very quickly that she's a really thrifty liver. And so we were able to kind of share that mentality as well of saving and investing. And I knew that there was long-term compatibility there. And it was another thing that I didn't realize that I was looking for until I found it. And we've been inseparable since. So it's been great.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things. If you are single out there, I've always been told, like, if you're single and you're trying to find somebody, get as busy as you can, do the things you love, and then all of a sudden you might meet somebody who's doing those same things. What an opportunity! Because again, what if you would have met somebody in the States, but then you want to go live in Vietnam? That's kind of a hard pull to say, like, hey, let's go, all the way around the world here, and I'm going to be a teacher, and I'm going to do all these different things, and maybe move to other continents along the way. That might be hard for someone, but when you meet somebody who's already doing it, say, hey, we're both on board of the same train here. And again, like you said, maybe you didn't realize it, but let's backtrack. That
Sure.
Catholic school that you were at in Florida as a part of that, what was it, ACE program?
Yeah, Alliance for Catholic Education,
Yeah,
ACE.
the ACE program, it's safe to say that you were making under 25,000 a year to do that job.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so you're making under 25,000 there. Now you do have housing covered, right? Which that
yes.
helps. But it's
Hmm.
not like you have like your own big apartment or anything like that where you have a ton of privacy probably to yourself. And then you go back home. What an opportunity. We've had a handful of people on the show that they've taught in the district or maybe in the same school building that they went to. Can you talk about the jump in salary? I know you mentioned that, you got used to the frugal living. Was it a big jump up there in the Minnesota suburbs? And how much were you making there in Minnesota?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So, it's fun. I've been following some of the salary ladders that you've been posting recently because I know that you have a new contract in North Carolina, and I remember tracking that religiously and going to all those board meetings and the
Yeah.
salary the arguments about finding contract negotiations and yeah. So when I started there, I was pleasantly surprised that they started me on the step that they did because my time that I had spent in South America, their school year is offset from ours because the seasons are different. But they credited me with all the years included, even though there was kind of like a half year in there. And so I started there because I had my master's and I had been doing more coursework. And as I was at Edina and I continued to do more quarter and semester credits, I was able to work my way all the way to the end of the pay scale. And I think when I left, I was making in the low 70,000s. I would have to double check. I'm not entirely sure. That's
Sounds
crazy to
about
me now.
right.
This was 8 years ago, but yeah, it
Yeah.
would have been somewhere in that range. Um, and yeah, like so, I went from community living in Florida. We were in a suburb called Pinellas Park of St. Petersburg. And we were on like at a parking lot of a church, basically, is where our house was. It was kind of this standalone house in the middle of a bunch of tarmac. And we made community dinners. So like one person would cook for everybody. And we would trade off who would cook and who would do the dishes. It was like having a chore chart. And then coming back to Minnesota, where for a couple years I actually lived with my parents, which I know is a great gift to be able to do. And I talked about it with my dad. I said, I'm making more money. Like I could totally get myself a place. And my dad like was an early adopter of the stock market, like kind of 60s, 70s. And he was like, stay with us, invest your money, right? Like do whatever you can to put as much of that away. And I was surrounded by people at Edina as well who kept saying, like, we know you're young. This is like new to you. Make sure you're investing as much as you can because we had a pretty good employer match for our 403B there. It was through AXA. And yeah, so I was squirreling away everything I could. And I was picking up, you talk a lot about coaching. I was picking up as much as I could on the sub list. I coached a math team there. I also was tutoring on the side. So like I had more income than I ever knew how to spend. And so I was like, just putting it away, right? Maxing out Roth, putting stuff into taxable brokerage. Like I got everything set up during that period of time. And I was really getting into the FI community at that point. I hadn't found Fit yet. I'm not sure when you started. You might not have been around yet. Um, but I knew that investing in S&P 500 total index funds, like this was the way, right? Get the money in and just let it sit there. You don't have to check it every day. You don't have to be day trading, just time in the market over timing the market, right? Like you hear that all the time. And so I was putting a ton of money away. After a couple years, I was like, okay, like, I think I should probably like look at other living situations. And I had a bunch of buddies that were still in town from my high school days. Some were working for
What
Tart.
ages were you
Yeah,
back in Minnesota, just for a
absolutely.
timeline?
Yeah, yeah. So this would have been from like 26 to 31, I want to say. Yeah, that would make sense. 26 to
Gotcha. So you
31
had
is when I was back in
a bunch
Minnesota.
of buddies still there. Sorry, we'll pick
Yep,
back up
yep,
there.
no worries. Yep. So some of them were working at Target, which is a Minneapolis
Yeah.
company, and they were staying in a house in Uptown, and they were in a duplex, and the neighbors downstairs were moving out, And they said, hey, like if we can find four more guys, we could have a nine-guy house. And so we did that for
The
two
real
years.
world Minnesota.
Oh my gosh. It was a riot, man. And like with nine dudes in a house, like rent was cheap. And so I did that gig for a couple years. And while I was living there, uh, something that had always, the casino world has always fascinated me. Not to play. Any mathematician knows you should not gamble in a casino unless you've got a really good team and strategy, which is another show. But I had always wondered what it would be like to deal blackjack. I grew up playing games. I'm a card player. I love playing bridge and spades and euchre and 500. And I was just like, if I could get paid to play cards, like that sounds super fun. And they were doing a free blackjack training kind of experience at Mystic Lake Casino. And it was a 3 week training. So I would teach all day, and then I would go from 5 to 11 to training. And did that for 3 weeks, and they hired me, and I worked weekends for 2 years. So I was commuting from uptown, and my last year there, I moved to a different shared house. But like living with roommates was another opportunity just to be able to stockpile money away. And I couldn't believe how fast it was growing. Like, I mean, we had some good years in the market. We've had some good years in the market. And getting all that money in my 20s, like, was so huge to be able to start building that wealth. And by the time I got to Vietnam, where you could never spend your entire paycheck if you tried, it's not entirely true, but like, I mean, I was investing so much money, and I was able to have that big lifestyle gap, that I just kept watching the wealth grow, and it's been a crazy ride, and it's been nice to have you guys along every step of the way. So yeah,
Man, that's awesome. So, I have a lot of things popping up in my head here because
go
we
for
went
it.
to Vegas. We went to Vegas last summer with my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and then my wife and two kids. And a lot of people are like, why are you bringing kids to Vegas? That's not a very family-friendly place. Well, Vegas apparently has made things a lot more family-friendly over the years. And we went to, the Hoover Dam and we did the Grand Canyon and a lot of fun stuff. My son is fascinated with blackjack. He's 13
Yeah,
and him and his little buddies will play and they'll play for Pokemon cards and do things like that and mess around. But
I love
it
it.
just reminds me, I'm picturing you like in the Vegas Vacation movie, the
Yeah.
you're not bald and you're not old, but I'm picturing that guy that's like laughing at
Why
Clark
don't
every
you
time.
buy
And
a bullet and rent the gun? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Did
yeah.
do you have any, maybe a crazy story or two that you can share where you saw somebody making some really bad economic choices as far as you were there and somebody was dropping thousands of dollars and they started maybe losing it or what?
Yeah, man, the casino is wild. What I always told people, because a lot of people ask, they say, is it ever sad? And I said, I was dealing on Friday and Saturday nights, right? Like that was my gig because it was really the only time I could make it work with my teacher schedule. And you could never pay me enough money to deal blackjack at like noon on a Tuesday. I don't want to know who's at the casino at noon on a Tuesday, right? Like, I was dealing to like bachelor parties and bachelorette parties and like people looking to like unwind after a hard week at work. It was not the people that were dropping thousands of dollars. But I started off in what they called the cosmic pit, which I don't know if you've done like cosmic bowling, like
Yeah.
lights and music and right, and they're trying to hook in the young kids, which is interesting. But low table limits. We played games like we would cover up our trays and we would like do like games with like trying to move ping pong balls out of a bowl and into the next person's table and stuff. I don't know, like it was crazy. And I DJ'd that area for a while as well. And so it was interesting to kind of like meet kids from the area because they knew I was a teacher. I would always talk at the table. I couldn't turn it off, right? So I'd chat with kids about like their what was going on at their schools, and kind of like what they were wanted to do for uni, and like it was fun to kind of get that side of things. And then because I was they talk about your hands per hour as a dealer, so like how fast you deal. And if you have a decent hand rate and you're really good with the math and the chips and that all, like I love that stuff. They will sometimes move you to high limit, so I ended my time at Mystic Lake by dealing in the high limit room. And that was a different ball game. Like You definitely had people. We had tables that they called three to threes, so a minimum of $300, a maximum of 3,000, and you would have people playing $1,000 a hand. And yeah, I know, right?
Cannot
And
imagine. I cannot imagine.
yeah, and as a dealer, you kind of become a little bit desensitized to it because it's all chips, right? The math works no matter if the chip's worth 1,000 or 100 or one. And yeah, like there was one person I remember in particular. She's probably about my age, and she was talking to me. She said, "Yeah, like you start coming with your friends, and then next thing you know, like you're bringing your paycheck to the casino and cashing it in, and like that's what you're doing with your Friday night." And I was like, wow, like it's truly an addiction. Like now when I see all of the like, casino app ads on Hulu or
Mm.
whatever, and they're talking about it like, it's an escape from reality or it's like the only way to have fun. And I just think, man, like phones are addicting enough as it is, and you add the casino aspect to it. Like I've seen it in person. I've seen it through sports betting. I've seen it through the apps. Like it's a tough thing to break. So yeah, I don't know. Like I saw most of the people I saw were just having a good time. They were bringing 50 or $100 to the casino to try their luck for the night, and that was it. But there were exceptions to that rule, and I do not recommend gambling as a sound financial decision to anybody. That's
Yeah,
for
there's a
sure.
reason why the casinos are as big as they are and our houses are the size that they are.
The
But yeah, I think
law law of
it's sad.
large numbers.
And these
You got
kids,
it.
teaching high school here in the States, I don't know how it is there, but they're all in on sports betting and everything else. And maybe they have a sibling that signs up that's older, that's over 18 or 21. I don't even know the laws because I just don't do that stuff. But
Hmm.
here you have high school kids betting on the NBA finals or they're betting on, NFL games and, $50 here. And then you see all the commercials. I mean, it's kind of ironic that I'm a Cleveland fan and our closer, Emmanuel Clase, a baseball closer a couple years ago, he's now been banned from Major League Baseball for betting on games. Like he
Sure.
would tell people,
Hmm.
hey, I'm going to throw a ball the first pitch and it's going to be in the dirt. And he'd let two
Yeah.
or three people know and they'd be betting big money on it, but he doesn't really throw balls. But then they're like, hey, don't do this. And then you look behind home plate and they have all the advertising behind home plate back there and you see it from the camera angle from the
FanDuel,
pitcher.
right?
And it's
Yeah.
FanDuel, Bet 365 and all this stuff. So everywhere you go, you can't escape it. I'm sure we could do a whole like episode on it. But so here you are, you're making 70 grand or so.
Yep.
You're making 70 grand, but then you're doing the casino stuff. And it looks like you have three different buckets of investing going on. You've got, a Roth IRA. You mentioned that you have a 403B match at your school, which is kind of rare, especially in the South where we're at, with no unions or anything. But you also had a taxable brokerage account. And then you kind of catch this bug, the financial independence bug. Did you
Yeah.
find the podcast, or maybe was it an online Facebook group that you found first? How did that get into
It was
Noah's Rock?
honestly it was honestly through a friend. One of my buddies who did the Alliance Catholic for Catholic Education with me. He was teaching in Southern California, and his family is kind of spread out across Illinois and Wisconsin, and they've settled down in Madison, and that was a really logical stopping point between Notre Dame and home, and I've done that drive so many times. And so I was staying with them one time, and they were talking to me. They said, "Have you heard of like Dave Ramsey and Collins and like all these big buzzword names that we all know now?" And I said no, like I've never really read anything about this. Like most of what I know is what I heard from my dad, and just kind of like in my like what I know is common sense, right? And so I read the stock series by J.L. Collins online, and that kind of led me to Mr. Money Mustache. And so I was reading a lot of blogs online. I've never been a big podcast listener. Apologies to all the podcasters out there, but I like to read. And so, like recently, I mean, I've gotten into, Die with Zero and Retire Often by Jillian Johnsrud, I think is her name.
Yep.
And uh, everything that I absorb, right? There's little pieces I'm like, yeah, yeah, like that really resonates with me. I get that. Or I already do that, or ooh, this is something I hadn't thought about. But that inception of this friend just kind of saying like, hey, you should read some of this stuff because all the stuff you're talking about, like there are people out there that you could find and you could talk to and like you could maybe get some new ideas and add some more stuff to your buckets. And I remember seeing like, some of those graphics with the waterfall of the buckets when you talk about the buckets. Like,
Yeah.
are you paying off all your debts? I'm like, I don't have any debts. That was one of the greatest gifts that I ever got from my parents. They were like, don't use a credit card like a credit card, right? Use it like a debit card. And being able to like between scholarships and help from my parents, like not having college debt, I understand again that's a huge privilege. And so being able to say, okay, the debt's paid off. So now I'm looking at how can I get match from my employer? How can I get tax advantage through the Roth accounts? And then whatever's left, taxable brokerage. And yeah, like it was like my eyes were opened to this community and this online environment of being able to find like-minded people that more than anything, it's just like they encourage you to keep going, right? Like they help you out. And I love that that's what you do for teachers. I mean, because I like you say all the time, it feels like a lot of teachers, like sometimes it can feel like we're living paycheck to paycheck. But when you see that people are doing it, like, driving a car for more than 5 years, right? Or, not getting that bigger house. Like I think your story about downsizing is super inspirational. Like this stuff is huge for teachers to hear, I think, because when we think about all the time we have off, that's kind of built in, like super great gift. And how we can spend our money effectively and still have some left over to save. Like even you say all the time, $100 a month. Can you start at $100 a month? And it's like finding that and finding those people with that mentality, I think is great.
Yeah, I think it's so important for the teachers because a lot of people just don't know what they don't know, and they just assume
Mm.
and they hear from everybody else. I can't ever build wealth being an educator. And I say all the time, even if you've done nothing, you haven't done anything terrible, but you also haven't done anything like you have no debt, but you also haven't saved a penny. There are
Yeah.
so many teachers across America that are going to have a 35 to maybe $65,000 a year teacher pension, but you didn't even have to try to get that $1 million plus income over the course of your lifetime in retirement. If
Yeah.
you do even the 100 a month and then you do 115, then 130, and then maybe 145, and you just stair step this thing over the course of a 30-year career, I don't think the teacher profession necessarily has maybe the stress level that some in the private sector do when it comes to 100% of your retirement is based on what you do.
Yeah.
And you have to actually contribute. Now, I do support laws, I guess, whether you want to call this political or not, but I do support some of the states that are out there that are mandatory auto enrolling people into their 401k match, and you have to opt out versus like companies probably hoping you don't opt in, and then it saves them money potentially or whatever. So I love the auto opt in thing, and you have to actually sign a waiver to opt out of it. And they're saying, based on early studies, that's been highly successful. And people are realizing, wow, this was coming out of my check, but I got used to living, like you said, kind of below my means a little bit here. My lifestyle creep wasn't moving up. So you're in Minnesota for 6 years or so. Is it safe to say with the side gigs and whatnot, you did the DJing, I also knew you were in a band and you did the casino stuff. Did that
Yeah.
income cross over the six-figure mark before you end up moving to Vietnam?
That's a great question. And
Guesstimate.
for
Estimate.
for a guy like me who loves a good spreadsheet, like I tracked so much of my income at the casino, but I wasn't adding everything together. I wasn't looking at cumulative stuff because and I was talking about this with someone recently and they said that they hadn't thought about this a lot, but I was really just trying to hit investment targets, right? I was like, if I can invest this much every month, I don't really care what is happening elsewhere with my income as long as I'm making ends meet. But yes, I must have been over six figures.
So you were not
Yeah.
somebody at that point that was like the Dave Ramsey envelope system and tracking every penny that came in and out of, you know, your bank account. You had more of the mindset of, I'm just making up a number. Hey, I want to invest, $6,500 a year and max out my Roth IRA. I want to put 10 grand into my taxable brokerage, and I want to at least get my match in the 403B. As long as I do that, and as long as I don't go in debt, money can flow in and it can flow out. And even if it's forced scarcity where you're living paycheck to paycheck because of all the saving and investing, you were good with that.
Exactly. Yep. And I think back to this because v Vietnam is really where the spreadsheets fell away because I realized it was silly to track every penny in Vietnam because you can get dinner in Vietnam for under $2, like a good dinner. And so I was coming from in Minnesota. I was tracking things closely, so I'm surprised that I can't think of like exactly what I was making. But like my goal was kind of like, can I invest $1,000 a week? And like that, I mean, I know like it's a dream for a lot of people, but because my income was at a level where and my expenses were so low, that was a possibility. And I was like, yeah, as long as that was happening and the flow was happening, I was happy. Um, yeah, and we talk about this idea of um, how much you can save. And this is something that I think happens a lot when teachers go abroad. So if anyone is interested ever in teaching abroad, please get in touch with me because I'd love to talk about it. But like in Vietnam, I say you can get dinner for under $2, but there was a part of Ho Chi Minh City called Thao Dien, which is where a lot of the expats live. And there were for sure establishments in that area that were geared towards expats that they knew were making like a US living wage. And you could have easily gone to those places instead of going to kind of the Vietnamese hole in the wall kind of places. And you could have spent your whole paycheck. But I think that if you can leverage those options where like taking advantage of the place you are and the ways that you can save a little bit here and a little bit there, that like geo arbitrage, living abroad, right? Like you can save a ton of money. And it's true here too in Prague. Like, I mean, there are people that spend all their money every month, and I just can't imagine doing that. Like, it's not part of my ethos. I don't know how I could do that, but yeah,
So let's backtrack. You go
sure.
to Vietnam and you're around 31 years old or so
Hmm.
at that point. What did you do when you're exiting the Minnesota system? Were you thinking maybe I'll come back? I'm just going to go ahead and
Mm-mm.
leave everything
Mm-mm.
within the state system there as far as the pension goes? Or did you, when you exit, say, you know what? I don't ever plan on coming back to Minnesota. Let me go ahead and take what they've pulled out from my pension contributions and roll that in to something else. How did that breakup go with the state of Minnesota?
That is such a great question. So, one of the reasons I stayed there for 5 years is because our school district, Edina, and I think this is probably true Minnesota wide, they're really good at dangling carrots in front of you. They say, okay, if you stay 3 years, you're vested in your pension. If you stay 5 years, at that point, you can take what they call a leave of absence. And that's up to 5 years. And they have to have a guaranteed job for you coming back. If you stay 10 years, I believe you can get a partially paid sabbatical. I don't know if that's still the case for new teachers, but it was when I was there. And at 5 years, that's kind of when I realized I was like, if I don't leave, I'm never going to leave because at some point you got golden handcuffs and it's almost impossible to go anywhere else. So at 5 years, I took the leave of absence, and you have to renew every year. I think in January of every year, you can renew and say, hey, I'm going to be gone another year. I'm going to be gone another year. And you can do that up to 5 years. And that was kind of my plan. I was like, I might not come back, but if I did, it would be much simpler if I was already in the system. And so that was kind of the mentality I took leaving for Vietnam. But what I realized was my 403B that I had in Minnesota that was great when I was there because I was getting an employer match, I think up to, I don't know if it was 1.5 or 2 or 3%. I feel like it might have been three. But so it was great when I was getting the match, but the funds that I had in my 403B through AXA, which we had, a list of like 10 funds you could choose or something, right? Like that's how it often works when you're getting matches. They were high expense ratio funds. And so AXA was making a bunch of money off of my money that was sitting there, but I wasn't getting any employee match anymore because I wasn't in the state. And unless I officially left Minnesota in terms of their employment, like in the eyes of the state in terms of employment, I couldn't roll that money into my own account. And so at that point, I was probably my second or third year in Vietnam. I said, okay, like this is a bad deal. I want to control those funds myself. And AXA did not like that. I had a lot of I mean, you're, I think, 12 hours apart from Minnesota when you're in Vietnam. And so I had a lot of like midnight phone calls with AXA trying to get this thing done. And I rolled the money into my own account and officially said goodbye to Minnesota. Uh, in anticipation, because you talk so much about the pension in North Carolina, I did want to see, and I've never done the calculation because I was like, I know it's going to be depressing, but I looked into what my pension is going to be with they take your average across your highest 5 years of earning. It's 1.9% times five times your average of 5 years of earning. I think in retirement, I'm going to get $475 a month, which interestingly is about what I was making when I was living in Florida. So, if you ignore inflation, it'll be like going back to what I was doing there. But of course, I've set myself up with retirement accounts in other ways. But the breakup from Minnesota, it didn't feel like that big of a deal because when I was actually leaving, it was a leave of absence. And so they were all saying, oh, we hope you'll come back. And then when I was actually severing ties, I was half a world away. And so it didn't feel like that big of a thing. And I rolled everything over into Vanguard and manage it myself now. So
I, I think you
all good in
brought
the
up
end.
a really interesting point about the golden handcuffs. Like I was
Mm,
actually over here thinking about that
yeah.
myself because I just finished my 20th year in North
20 years.
Carolina. 20
Congratulations.
years,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Um, which now qualifies me. I'm one of those grandfathered in folks before January 1st of 2021. And I don't think there's that many states or districts that do it, although I know there are some. Is now that I've got my 20 years in, when I reach the age of 50, if I decide to draw on that pension, I have non-contributory health care for myself until the age of 65 when I transition to Medicare. That is
Wow.
huge. Now,
Huge.
that's huge. Now, that doesn't cover like, my wife's isn't free, my kids until 26, that won't be free, but they get to stay on at the same rate that it was while I was still working, which isn't the best in North Carolina. I think it's $598 for a family of four. And again, that's just your premium. That's if nothing
Yeah.
happens. You still have deductibles after, but it's nice
Yeah.
to lock in on that 20-year mark. But going back to the golden handcuffs, I do have them because if I got out right now after 20 years, that's a lot of service to one place. And I've been at one school. My pension, if I got out now, would be about $1,200
Hmm.
a month the rest of my life. That's pre-tax starting at age 50. But if
Yeah.
I just teach another 7 or 8 years, like I plan on doing, the monthly pension goes from 1,200 closer up to like 3,600 a month. So it's like, that's just 7 years of work. If you're a young teacher right now and you're like Noah, maybe you're an adventurous spirit and maybe you want to maximize, teaching in multiple states in the South, the Midwest, and then going to different continents. Like once you cross that, I don't know, I'd probably say 5 to 8 year threshold or so. After year eight, like you're almost locked in. Like at that point, it makes it very difficult to leave your state or to leave, your district or the profession at all. Now, I do know that South Carolina, I think Alaska, Michigan, and some other states, they're getting more creative now, where you have the option, hey, do you want to go into the defined benefit system, the pension system, or do you want to do a match and do a defined contribution system? So I think it's really nice that some states are getting more creative because the idea of like working somewhere for 30 years in the same district or the same state is very, very rare these days. But anyway, if you're thinking about it and you're before year five, like Noah, and you want to do international, I'd say I'd rather do it now or just stick it out and then maybe you do it at the end. If you
Yeah.
can retire at 52, 53, and then go international after that, that's another thing to think about. So let's talk about this package in
Sure.
Vietnam.
Hmm.
Was it the package that they put together that enticed you to go to Vietnam, the living quarters, the pay, or was it more of I want to go to Vietnam and if they actually happen to have a good package as well?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to go to Asia. Asia was the continent I felt I had explored least. I did a summer in Uganda when I was teaching at Edina. They had a global citizenship program where we went and did some local outreach, like some teaching to community members about skin infections. So that was super interesting. I had been to Europe with my family. I've never been to Australia, but getting into the international teaching game in Australia and New Zealand is pretty difficult. You kind of have to have some ins with international community already. In Asia, for-profit schools are a huge business, huge. Um, and there are so many companies that relocate people from the West, so from the US or Canada or anywhere in Europe. They'll relocate their people that they need in Ho Chi Minh City or in Hanoi or in Singapore or anywhere in China because they have a lot of outsourced work there. And so they'll bring in kind of these executives and they will pay school tuition for their kids to go to school. So this is where the money train comes in because these schools are like, okay, so basically all of these companies are willing to pay whatever to get their kids into these schools. And so like the school that I was teaching at had about a $30,000 a year tuition tag with it. And like
US
for most
dollars?
US dollars. And for most Vietnamese families, that is just like a crazy amount of money, like a lifetime generational wealth kind of money. And so we had some elite Vietnamese students. We had a lot of students from Korea. We had a lot of students from Europe and the USA. Um, Fair number from Japan as well. And so the way that most schools do it is when you apply, you can kind of see what kind of a package you're going to get. So we had a housing allowance. There are some schools that provide you with housing. They give you an apartment. Sometimes like a whole floor of an apartment building will all be teachers from the same school. But we actually went apartment hunting. That was like part of our kind of first few weeks in Vietnam was to try to find a place we like to live. They definitely gave us enough for a comfortable one or maybe even a two bedroom, depending on if you weren't super picky about the neighborhood you were in. Apartment, fully furnished. Usually they came. Almost everyone had a cleaner that would come once or twice a week. If you had kids, almost everyone that had kids had a nanny that would pick them up from school, bring them home, cook dinner. And like all of this was very affordable with our salary. But the actual package, there was no retirement offering in Vietnam. I think their stance was just, we're paying you enough, figure it out yourself. Which, as we were talking about before, like with the state mandates now for 401ks, like some people are not savvy enough to be like, okay, I have this pile of money. What should I do with it? And they'll, go on a vacation or splurge on a big trip or something, I don't, whatever it might be. Whereas I was like, oh man, like how am I gonna manage this pile of money that I can still invest? So the salary was a big draw for a lot of people at our school. For me, I was more what you were talking about at the end. I was like, I want to be as far away from the US as possible. I want to go somewhere that I'll feel like it's very difficult to run home if things are going poorly. Like I want to figure it out for myself. I wanted a challenge, and I definitely found it. But looking back, like I was very naive, I think, about the international school community. I got very lucky with the school that I landed in. I taught with incredible colleagues. It was not, I wouldn't say it was like a top tier school in Ho Chi Minh City. I would say it was like just under, like a B tier school in the city. The big schools, if anyone is listening that knows Ho Chi Minh City, ISHMIC, the International School of Ho Chi Minh City, SSIS, the Saigon South International School. Those are kind of the two really big ones. The British International School is pretty big there as well. And then we were kind of like I would say on tier two. And but like I learned a ton. I met a bunch of people, I made a bunch of connections, and that's what the international teaching game is all about. Because then you're looking forward to like, okay, where am I going next? Like which prestigious schools exist out there, and how can I make sure that I get a package that I feel like is worthy of my teaching skills and my abilities. Yeah.
What was the pay there in Vietnam for you?
Yeah, I was making about 52,000 on top of like housing provided. And so that 52,000 like I mean, I I bought a motorbike. There are 13 million people in Ho Chi Minh City, and I think there are 15 million motorbikes. Uh, which is crazy. But I bought a little Honda Wave. I think I paid, let's see, I think I paid 10 million for it, VND, which is like two or $300.
Wow.
And like gas is like basically nothing to run those things. And I had an 18-minute commute to get from my apartment to the school. And so like almost all my money was for travel and investing.
What would the
Um,
equivalent be? I'm not asking you to like do an exchange rate or anything like that,
yeah,
but for somebody that has housing covered, but you're making 52,000. Now, again, we just talked earlier that you're making in the 70s when you left your
right.
school in Minnesota. And when you add in the other side gigs, let's call it 100. So your salary is almost essentially cut in half, let's call it. But
Yep.
what would it be the equivalent of with your lifestyle that you could have had? Would making 52,000 with housing covered in Vietnam be the equivalent of somebody in the States making 150, maybe 250, 200? If you just had to guess.
I was gonna say 200 to 250. Like my lifestyle that I had in Vietnam, if I were to have done that in Minnesota and still like we ate out every day in Vietnam because cooking was more expensive. Like the going to the grocery store and like trying to source cheap ingredients was very difficult in Vietnam. It was better to just go get a bowl of pho on the corner. And it tasted better too, guaranteed, compared to my cooking. And so, like, if I were to eat out every day in Minnesota, like the way that I did in Vietnam, I would have had to be making like 200, $250,000 to have the same lifestyle and still be able to be investing at the rate that I was. Um, yeah, I mean, my expenses. We talked about we would joke about the 100K a day. So Vietnamese dong, it's about 20 when I left. I don't know what it is now. It was about 25,000 Vietnamese dong to the dollar. And so we would talk about the 100K a day challenge. So 100,000 Vietnamese dong, which is between $4 and $5. You could definitely do that like a day, every day, living on $4 to $5. And do the math, like the expenses there were cheap. And with rent covered, I mean, like, and this is true for a lot of international schools, is that you'll have a package where they're paying for your rent, and you can really be smart and savvy about what you do with that leftover money.
So at that point, you said that the district or whatever kind of said, "Hey, well, we're paying you this good professional American salary. We're
Hmm.
covering your stuff in this package. Retirement's kind of on your own." So I could be wrong, but I'm guessing that maybe there was no 403B or 401k through the school. So at that point, you're loading up your taxable brokerage account because that's really your only option.
Yes. So this was interesting. The one of the first few weeks we were there, they had two guys come in suits and they were talking to us about some international investment options. And I think again, like they go where opportunity knocks, right? Like they know that expats are have a lot of disposable income, and they were offering like sometimes like 2% ex like fee accounts. And I was like, wow, like my VTSAX is 0.04%, right? Like
You're paying like $30 on every hundred
yeah,
thousand or something. Yeah.
exactly, right? Like I just and so I was talking to them because they were very honest. Like I could tell they didn't interact with people like me very often who kind of know what's going on. And they were very open. And they said, yeah, like I said, so let me explain to you what I've been doing and ask you if you think there's a better way. I was like, I can send money home through there's an app called Wise. I don't know if you've heard of Wise before, a great money moving app, especially for expats. Very low expense fees for exchange rates and for moving money around. Um, and so I said, what I do is I send money back to my US account with Wise. I invest it there in my Vanguard account. And they said, yeah, I would keep doing that. I said, okay. So that's what I continued to do. Like every few months, I'd send a chunk of money home and invest it in my brokerage account that I had there. And there are always like little bonuses that happen in international teaching as well. So like in Vietnam, every February we got our home flight allowance. And that was just a chunk of cash. They would look at like how much it costs for a round trip ticket to your home of record, and they would give you that amount in cash. And some people were like, "Oh, like this month I'm gonna like do something with that." I remember the even the director. He told me when we were interviewing. I said like, how does this home leave benefit work? And he said, well, we give it to you in cash. You can go spend it on the racetrack if you want to. And I was like, that's going straight into
Spending on
my brokerage
blackjack.
account. Yeah, exactly. Put it all on red, right? But like that there's fluctuations in income for an international teacher. Like there are some months that are bigger because there's something about taxes. There are some months that are smaller because, in the summer we get paid less because we don't get our coaching stipends and things like that. And again, if you can leverage that, if you can kind of think like, can I live on my summer salary all year? Well, then you have that little cream off the top that you can just always be investing. And thinking that way, I think is huge for any teacher, but especially for international teachers that have extra disposable income and wondering how to best spend it.
So going back to day one in
Yeah.
Vietnam, you meet
Yeah.
this bombshell that you're in like your shorts and t-shirt here, and she's all dressed up and looking
Yep.
good, and you had to chase her down, and eventually she pulled a hammy, and you got to hang out. Um did you guys get married in Vietnam? Is that
Super
something
good
in that
questions.
4 year period happens? And unfortunately, we only have probably 5 to 7 minutes with time. Uh,
Just fine.
but I did want to kind of get that piece of the Vietnam puzzle together here.
Absolutely. So we actually we weathered the COVID storm together, and that's kind of when we both knew we were like, yeah, this has legs, it has staying power. We actually moved to Prague first. So we came here together, and it was a big issue to get Gretchen's visa because they didn't have a job for her right away, and because we weren't married yet, it was going to be difficult for her to be able to stay here without having like the companionship visa. So she was kind of bouncing back and forth between here and the States so that she wouldn't go over her 90 days, which is how long you can stay here without a visa. Um, and so I was like, all right, that Christmas. I was planning on waiting until that summer. We went to Paris for the Olympics in 24, but that winter I went back home and I proposed at home, and then we got married that summer in. You said you're a bit of an Ohio guy. We got married on South Bass Island, which you probably know
Yeah.
is Put-in Bay.
Yeah.
Yep. So her family's got a house there. It's been in their family for generations. And I was like, man, like let's just do a small wedding. Let's just have a few people. And so that's what we did. We got married in the summer of 2024 in Ohio, and had to get everything translated to Czech so that we could prove that we were married. And everything's and by that point it was funny because she had a job, like they found a job for her, and then the visa thing was a non-issue, but that's not why we got married. We got married because we love each other, and she's awesome. But yeah, it's another thing that people talk about, like teaching couples, like because you can kind of get like a double package, especially if
Yes.
you can kind of stay separated for a while. Once you get married, then like a joint package comes in, which feels kind of like a 1.5, not a 2.0, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
But still, like, I mean, you have two people that are highly marketable in the international education world. Like, we are very happy to be kind of bouncing around and teaching where we want to live and where we want to travel. It's been really good.
Choose your own adventure, it sounds like.
You got
Now
it,
it's
man.
not, one of the things you were attracted to was, she was teaching internationally. You mentioned that she was a saver and things like that.
Yeah.
Was there any tugging that you had to do for, getting on board with like the financial independence movement with her? Was there education that happened, or did she know a lot of this stuff on her own as well?
Uh, it was more just kind of she she's a little bit like my mom. She was like, you like doing this, so you do it because it's a headache for her. It's not that she can't do it or she doesn't know. I mean, she's super smart. But she just said, hey, like if you like doing this stuff, I trust you. And especially after we got married and went to a joint account, she was just like, yeah, like, as long as we have enough money to do the fun little trips that we like to do around Europe, I'm okay with whatever you want to do. And so it was not a lot of pushing and tugging. She was happy to have someone that would take that off her plate.
That's fun within our community is people like you and I. Like, honestly, I'm at the point now, even having been a sports guy my whole life, I would rather do something like this and talk about, these opportunities that now might open doors for other teachers to think internationally than even watching a ball game on TV, because you're really
You mean
helping
the
people in real life. and it's something that can make your family better, generational wealth. It's become a hobby of mine. Obviously, if I do a podcast, 270 sometimes in a row, it better be a hobby. Otherwise, you're not going to make it that long. But there are nerds like you and I that we really enjoy this stuff. I don't view it as work when we get to talk about the rule of 72 and the pension and 403B match and all that.
Yeah.
Now, you guys are
Man,
net worth millionaires. Did that happen before she and you tied the knot there in Put-in Bay in Northwest Ohio?
yeah, that was actually something that mattered more to me than I thought it would. And like it wouldn't have halted our marriage or anything, but I kind of wanted to hit the $1 million mark before we combined all our finances. And I did. When I was kind of in my late 36, early 37, so right before we got married. Um, and it happened. I checked Empower one day, and there were two commas in my net worth, and I was like, "Wow!" Like I think about all the people that helped me get here, from the FI community, from the fit community, from my family, my friend in Madison that told me, "Hey, go find these communities," and yeah, it's just like everyone says, the first 100,000 is the hardest, and the first 500,000 is the hardest, the first million is the hardest, and it's at least the way the market has been, like it's all true. I mean, like the growth as a math guy, right? Exponential. And yeah, and so combining now, I mean, the math, the scary math, especially living where we are, is that we could stop teaching. But we like it right now. And if you like it, why not? And I hear kids are expensive. I don't know. This
Yes.
is so we kind of want to see what happens with the finances this next year. But a year off might be in the cards because it's different. There are no golden handcuffs here, right? Like there's no retirement guarantee that's keeping me in a job. And so I think I could negotiate kind of a la Jillian and her retire off and tell the school, hey, could I take a year off and go do something with my kid, get to know them, do a little traveling, and then see where we are, right? Maybe we come back, maybe we realize that the finances work themselves out and insurance isn't as crazy and complicated as we think it is, and and we can make it
Yeah.
work. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think the key to your story, and people would say, well, how can you take a year off like in your late 30s and not, and still live if you're not making income? Well, there's really two options there. It's a taxable brokerage account, which
Mhm.
you're investing in the market, whether it be the S&P 500 or a total stock market index fund, whatever it may be, not picking individual stocks, but you don't have also the handcuffs of having to wait until 59 and a half. You can immediately access that stuff. And
Yeah.
because you're not working and you have no earned income, I think a couple right now in the US, you can make upwards to almost $100,000,
Yeah.
like
$96.
$96,000, $96,000.
I got
And
my eye on that number.
any of the growth that happens in those accounts, as long as you pull out less than that 96, no money in taxes.
Yeah.
So,
No
or
cap
you could do
gains.
like the rental real estate piece or whatever, which
Right.
that's another way that you could potentially be able to retire early, where people obviously, you've got to have a roof over your head. If you had enough properties, that would be another way to do it. But
Yeah.
obviously, there could be complications that go with that. So, one last thing really is how realistic is it for somebody to get one of these international gigs that isn't like a tier D minus school. You mentioned that you were very blessed and fortunate. You got into like a kind of like a B tier school. It was really good. It wasn't the best of the best, but it was solid.
Yeah.
I'm a history teacher. I'm a personal finance teacher. Do these
Mhm.
jobs exist in international communities to teach personal finance in history, or is it mainly more math? And do I have to know the language of the country that I might be moving to?
So international schools, any international school that I will teach in will be primarily taught in English. So like our school, everything is taught in English except for world languages. But there are like French international schools and German international schools that are taught in those languages as well. What I always tell people is you got to have an open mind. You got to be a flexible thinker. So like for someone like you who is well versed in history and finance, like you could easily teach a business course. And you could even turn it into a finance course. Next year, I'm teaching an elective about personal finance. Like they do exist, but like the core subjects, right? English, language and literature, science, math, right? We're a normal high school. Like that's what we're teaching. There is an IB history course that our school offers. We didn't offer it in Vietnam.
I've
Vietnam's a
taught
little
IB
bit.
history before, Noah.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
Vietnam was a little awkward about history, for maybe some obvious reasons. But yeah, like if you're willing to be flexible and you kind of put yourself forward that way, for most international schools, you need 3 years of teaching experience in a classroom, not like, student teaching or anything like that. You need to have 3 years of solid teaching experience and really solid references. If you can get someone to write you a sparkling reference, just like kids going to college, right? Like, I mean, that can make all the difference. And yeah, like it's who you know, right? Like if you know someone that has gone and taught abroad, tell them and see if there's anything open at a school that they're at. It is totally possible. Anyone can do it. All you got to do is just make the decision that you're going to make it happen. Last thing I'll say is that hiring schedules are usually pretty early for international schools. So if you want to go to Asia, you really got to you kind of have your ducks in a row by like October or November for the following school year. Europe is a little bit later. The good schools hire in December, but you could get a job even into March or April or May because a lot of the European countries have laws that a teacher doesn't have to say that they're leaving until April or May. And so they might be hiring later, but it's just something to keep in mind if your heart is set on a specific part of the world. Yeah.
And the last thing regarding the teaching internationally, what does the package look like in Prague?
Yeah, so here in Prague, we get about $1,000 stipend for housing, and our current rent, we're in a two-bedroom, and we pay about 1,500. So it doesn't quite cover what we have, but for some people, they can make it work if they have a smaller place. Um, we get about $500 a month for something they call retirement. It's just extra money on our paycheck. I don't know if they're required to give us something that is called retirement money. I know there are a lot of people that don't use it for retirement, but that's part of the package. Um, I'm making right now, including I hack our subbing system. We get paid $17 every time we sub. This past month, I subbed 31 times. So, you can do the math, but I give myself about a 3 to 4% raise by subbing as much as I can. And I make in the like 80 to 90,000 range when all is said and done. And cost of living in Prague is not bad. Um, the one thing that the Czechs refuse to let rise in price is beer. You can get a beer for about $2 anywhere at any restaurant. Three bucks is probably
It's not
more
an eight
likely though.
ouncer either.
No, no, they're tall boys for sure. Yeah, and I'm trying to think of other stuff. I mean, I help with a outdoors program that gives me a stipend every month. I coach the math team, and 1/3 of the year is contractual, but the other two are paid. Like anything, there's always little ways that you can find to amass a little bit more wealth. Um, yeah, it's been good.
No, this has been eye-opening. We've had a few international folks before that maybe didn't get as deep into the numbers. So, what an opportunity if you're a North Carolina teacher and you've only been, teaching a handful of years and we know the salary hasn't been the best in our state, although, hopefully this budget will officially get signed. Maybe you're in year 5 in North Carolina and you're making, 45 to $52,000 a year. What if you could go internationally and make the same salary? So, it might seem like, well, I'm not really making much more, but if the cost of living is 35 to 40% less, and you can
The
really
math,
stack away,
the
there's
math
this
is
other thing we
mathing.
talk, yeah, we talk about coast fi, right? What
Yeah.
if you could just, if you invested $25,000 by the age of 25, if you never invested another penny based on the rule of 72 and historical rates of return, which aren't always guaranteed in the future, of course, $25,000 turns into $1 million at 65. Now, of course, you do have to factor in inflation and things like that, but just that small seed getting planted and letting compound interest do its thing, man, it can work miracles. And the thing I love about this community is it doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your political persuasion, it doesn't matter how tall or short you are. If we understand the power of compound interest, we can make this happen for us over the course of, a 30-year career. And look at Noah. It happened for him before the age of 37, and he became a millionaire. I can't wait to see where you and your wife end up. Is there a goal? Last question. Is there
Ooh,
a goal, like a net worth goal? Because you said that was a really important goal for you to get to a million before
yeah.
you got married. Have you ever
Yeah.
thought about like Deca millionaire or?
This is something that I talk about with my parents because when I talk about taking a year off, it's hard, I think, for the next generation to get wrap their head around that, right? You work until you retire, right? That is
Yeah,
like that is the mantra, right? And I say, but I don't need $15 million, right? Like I don't know. You read Bill Perkins, Die with Zero, right? And he kind of
yeah,
takes it to the extreme, but it's like, man, what if I could just live a really simple life for under $96,000 a year, right? Drawing down on brokerage accounts and then eventually Roth and retirement accounts. Like, could you just exist and just live simply and enjoy life? I don't know. That's kind of why I want to try a year off and see what expenses look like. Because I feel like I have the fortune to be able to do that. And then we could do a little math, right? Use the 4% rule and see how much money we really need to be feeling secure. Um, yeah, so I don't know. Like right now, it's like, how do I do life with a kid? Um, and what does that look like, and what do expenses look like? And then I think we're gonna kind of have those conversations about like, how long do we have to go until
yeah.
we're happy, until we're in a good spot.
Yeah, I think
You
it's what is
mentioned,
your enough point? When is enough
yeah,
enough? And
yeah,
at some point, having more doesn't necessarily make you happier. There's a baseline level, I think. Yeah, they say that like 95,000 or something for a family. Like your happiness does go up from 40 to 60 to 80, but about
yeah,
90, 95, it kind of caps. Who knows? Maybe when you get in the billions like Bezos or somebody, it changes again. But um, it will be interesting as you recalibrate the life. You can talk to as many people as you want that, hey, babies really aren't that expensive, or, oh, be ready, man, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg until you go through it. And especially in another country with a different cost of living, it will be a learning experience for you guys over the next 18 to 24 months, and you'll get it down. But, I wish I could keep going. Like this could be two episodes because you have so much knowledge or so much fun. Such a, sharp guy. It was a pleasure to meet you finally after, kind of interacting some back and forth on social media, but you definitely have to promise after you've had the baby here and you get settled in that you come back on the show and give us an update.
absolutely, Dave. I really appreciate you. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Hey, I had so much fun. What a blast. You're awesome. It was such a good time. And thank you so much to all the fit listeners for joining this week's version of the Fit Educator podcast. We hope you join us for next week. And as always, be frugal, be fearless, and be a lifelong learner. And look for Noah on the Financially Independent Teachers Facebook page. Every now and again, he'll comment. And I guarantee you, if you have a comment or reply back to him about international teaching, he's a very helpful, nice guy. He'd be willing to give you some insight. So thanks again, Noah.
Yeah, bring it on. Love it.
Take care.